Thanks for joining me, and thank you, Lisa. I'm just going to crack on with the information. As Lisa says, there's quite a lot that we need to go through. So any thoughts or ideas that you may have, please pop them down, write them down, and if we have time at the end, we can try and do some questions. I'm not a vet, so I might not have all the answers, but we'll do the best that we can for you. Also, for those of you that are Bowen therapists, I'm not going to be going into any reference on Bowen, because obviously this is for the general public and for dog people, so we won't be talking about it from a Bowen therapist point of view. I'm going to be keeping it very simple. One thing I want to say just before you really begin is obviously I want to give you a basic understanding here. Awareness and recognition is so important, but we must also hold on to the awareness that we're not diagnosing and we are not vets. So it's always a good idea to have an awareness of our animals and understanding of how their systems work and what we see, but it's always important to hang on to the fact that the diagnosing and making assumptions or looking at conclusions in terms of problems are the role of the vets, which is a job I'm very glad I don't have, actually. Thank you very much. That's quite a hard one. So I'm just going to crack on now. Before I get into, we're going to go through the skeletal system first and then have a look at the muscular system. But I want to just introduce you to a few directional terms. I don't want to get into too much detail here, but there's things that I may mention sort of without even thinking about. So I thought if I gave you a vague idea, then it might help you. I'm not expecting you to remember this. This stuff seeps in slowly through the period of time of working with dogs and working with physiology. So a couple of things that you want to be aware of that I might mention are words such as cranial, which is basically moving towards the head of the dog. So as you can see from this diagram here, cranial is literally towards the head. So if I'm talking about directional terms of things, that might be a word you'll regularly hear from me. But obviously, if we are working towards the head and we're actually looking at directional terms from within the head, then there is something called rostral. One of my students came up with a great thing in the past, and she said rostral, not nostril. So that's a really good way to remember that one. Other words that you'll be hearing a lot if ever you get into anatomy and physiology is caudal. And caudal is this word here, and this basically means towards the rear of the dog, towards the tail. Okay. The only other words that you'll probably hear me mention today are dorsal, which is towards the top of the spine. Okay, so we're literally towards the top of the dog. And then ventral is literally coming around the belly, down towards the belly. There are more terms. I'm not going to get into the complications of that. Proximal is sort of towards the torso, and distal is towards the feet, so further away from the torso. As I say, I'm not expecting you to remember this. I have got this in a PDF for you guys to hang on to after the webinar. So we'll just move on and have a quick look at the skull. Now, here are a number of my friends. Frank, many of you will know, is a fabulous canine bone technique teacher, and he has a particular head shape. He's actually behind me now. I don't think he's going to move. He's having a bit of a snooze, but you might meet him later. And then we have Albert, my friend's wonderful pug, and Azzy, a wonderful shepherd cross. So we have different shaped heads here. So obviously when we're looking at the skull, excuse me, we have the dog's skull, and I'm going to just go into a little bit more detail about that in a moment. But we all know that dogs come in many different shapes and sizes. Okay, so we have the long-nosed dogs here, which are, don't forgive my pronunciation, the dolichocephalic dogs. I'm sure there's probably a better way to pronounce that. And then you have what I call sort of the middle range, the mesocephalic. And then there's been quite a lot of talk recently about the brachycephalic dogs, the more squashed noses. Okay, so I've given you examples here of the three different types of dog skulls, and these are the way that they're broken down. Um, Now, we work out what kind of head shape we would categorize a dog under by something called the cephalic index, which is a way to determine the dog's head shape by measurements comparing the widest part of the skull and the longest part of the skull. I'm not going to go into details of that, but if you do a good wiki search, they'll be able to break that down for you and explain it. And also they'll give you a list of what your breed would be categorized under in terms of dog head shapes. Okay, so I hope that's nice and clear for you there. Just so you know, I own the copyright on every single image within this PowerPoint and the PDF you're getting, apart from this one, the dog head shapes. So we've had that kindly donated from the SC Psychological Enterprises Limited. So they actually own this image here. So we're going to just go on now and have a look at, we'll actually go on and have a look at the shape of the canine skeleton. So what we want to do here is have a look more at the skull. And as you can see from here, this wonderful model that I work with quite often has got the two pieces here. Okay, but actually the skull is a fusion of a number of different bones. So if we move this wonderful skeleton around, you can actually see that you've got a number of different bones here that form the skull. So you have at the front the frontal bones. See, and then you have the parietal bone at the back. You have the maxilla, which also forms part of the skull, and the incisive bone. And then this isn't technically part of the skull, but we also have the mandible. Okay? So the upper jaw is formed by the maxilla, which are the maxillary bones, and the small incisive bone at the front there. Okay, and then if you're looking at the skull, so as I've discussed a moment ago, the dorsal aspect, the aspect on the top of the dog, the dorsal aspect of the skull is made up of the frontal bone and the parietal bone. Some of you guys are going to love my pronunciations. Okay, so we'll have a look at that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just show you another program here and just a little bit of a simple awareness of the skull. So when you're looking at the skull, we've got here the maxilla and the skull bones combined. Something you guys are going to be aware of is something called the occipital protuberance. We have one of those too. Okay, and this is the pointy bit that you become aware of at the back of the head. And then we all know what forms part of the eye socket is both the zygomatic arch, which is here, which is this arch here. Okay, and it's formed by the zygomatic arch, the eye socket, and the cheekbones. And then we also have the lower part of the jaw, as I say, which isn't part of the skull as such, and this is called the mandible. So I'm going to just show you this because this is quite fantastic. So it's all separate. So the mandible is not part of the skull, and it actually isn't connected. All of these are your combination of hyoid bones. Okay, so that's just a brief introduction to the canine skull anatomy. And what I'm going to do now is just talk to you about the spine. Okay. Now, obviously, as I'm sure you're aware, the spine in terms of us is quite different to the spine of the dogs. The curves are very different, and the shapes of the bones are different both from humans and dogs. We break down the spine into 3 different parts, and this is the cervical spine. So this is the top of the spine. So this is a canine spine here. And this is what we would call the atlas, which is right at the top of the head. So if I show you here, excuse me, where are we? We have my wonderful skeleton. So literally at the top of the head, we have the atlas. And then we have the axis. Now there's 2 things that we mention within the terms of the atlas and the axis, and that is that they are a very different shape to the other spinal vertebra. And we have the atlas, but the atlas has wings, so you have the wings of the atlas. And then we have the axis, which is a spine along there. And the interesting thing for you to note is the first 2 cervical vertebrae are the only 2 vertebrae that don't have an invertebral disc. So we're talking about cervical spine here, and we and dogs both have 7 vertebrae, 7 cervical vertebrae. So that's the same, both in humans and in dogs. We'll just have a quick look at the thoracic vertebra, and this is where I think it can be very noticeably different than ours. So within the thoracic vertebra, you literally have, that's classed as T1, so that's more cranial towards the head. And then here we have T13, which is more caudal towards the rear of the dogs. So as you can see, these spinous processes, which is what these are, all these vertebrae, and the spinous process are at the top. So these bits here are the spinous parts of the vertebra. And they change shape in the dogs. Now what's different in dogs than people is that dogs have 13 thoracic vertebrae, whereas humans actually have 12. So something that you may well have noticed with your dogs is you have a little dip along the spine. And this is between T10 and T11. Quite often your dog's coats will have a different pattern, a saddle, that literally goes to this point, and you can have a sort of flattening or a dip along the spine. And this is known as the anticlinal vertebra. And it's the point where the vertebra meet and change directions. So let's now have a quick look at the lumbosacral spine. We will make him smaller for you. So as you can see, this continues on from the thoracic, L1, and goes all the way to 7. So you've got 7 vertebrae there. In humans, just out of interest, they have 5. And then it goes on to the sacrum. Now the sacrum, if I can just rotate this, is actually a fusion of 3 bones, which you can't really see there, but it is actually fixed 3 bones in the dog. And we have 5 as humans, sacral vertebra, and dogs actually have 3. And then we goes on to the coccygeal vertebra, which is the tail. Okay, and with dogs, they can have between 5 and 23 vertebrae, and in humans we just have the 4. So I'm just going to get you to have a quick look here at the spine as a whole again. So you can see the head, we've got the dorsal bones that form the skull, we've got the mandible, which is the bottom of the jaw, we've got the atlas, which is the first of the cervical vertebra, and the axis, which has got that wonderful spine. If I show you, got the spine of the axis, and then you've got the wings of the atlas. Then we're going down to the thoracic vertebra here, all the way to T13. And then we work down the lumbar vertebra, if I can just show you. And then we're going to have, if I can show you the sacrum. That might be a bit hard to see. You've got the sacrum there. We won't go into too much detail because of the time. But you can see the distinct change. And obviously we're going to have differences in bones, differences in sizes, length of tails, the length and number of coccygeal vertebrae in the dogs. Just out of curiosity for you, a human has about 270 bones at birth, and then some of the bones fuse together, so it goes down, it decreases to about 206 bones. But with dogs, you're looking at an average of between 319 and 321 bones in the whole body. And the vertebral column has about 50 bones, but obviously that's going to depend on the length of the tail. Okay, so just having a quick look at the ribs here, you can see that we've got the 12 ribs, and then there's this 13th floating rib, which people don't have. Okay, and we also have, if we're looking at the dog here, look, we have the manubrium, which is part of the sternobray, it's part of the sternum of the dog. And then you've got the sternum. So all the ribs go round this rib cage and they attach with the cartilage, like the costal cartilage, to the manubrium, the sternum, and then they've actually, can we turn this one up here? You actually have a xiphoid process, which again is cartilage, and this can vary in length and how far it goes down along the underside, the ventral side of the dog's torso. What you'll find with the dog is you have the ribs, where are we? Rib 12 all the way to rib 5, which kind of form this costal arch, which runs here, which you'll probably feel quite often on your dogs. You can actually feel that. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at the front leg. I'll turn it round. I like a dog facing this way, I have no idea why. So, looking at the front leg here, the most obvious thing that we're aware of here is the scapula, which forms, we have a scapula, it's longer usually and narrower in a dog than it is with a human. And this here is, where my arrow is actually the shoulder joint. So the most proximal bone of the forelimb is the humerus. We're most proximal towards the body is the humerus. And then we have the radius, which is at the front, and the ulna. Now, I always find when I'm trying to remember the names of these bones, it's always quite handy to remember your alphabet. So R comes before U. So your radius is at the front, the cranial aspect towards the head, and the ulna is the caudal aspect of the bone, of the foreleg. Okay, they do actually have a slight twist in them, so it's not quite as black and white as that. But in simple terms, you're pretty much going to be right with the radius and the ulna in that way. So here we have the shoulder joint, and this is the elbow joint capsule. And then we're looking at the accessory carpal bones, the pisiform. Okay, so this is kind of the wrist. People call it the carpus, the wrist. And then you've got your metacarpals and your phalanges or your phalanx. And with those, you usually have the proximal phalanges or the proximal phalanx, which are the ones nearer to the body. Then you have the middle ones, and then you have the distal ones, so further away from the body, if you're remembering the directional terms that I was talking about. So that's your foreleg in terms of bones. So we'll just have a look at the rear. So we've got the pelvis, which is a combination of bones. We'll just have a look at it here. So we've got the ischium, which is this area here. And you've got the ilium. And then there's the pubis, which if we can turn, I'd be in trouble if I did this to a real dog. So these bones form the ischium, the pubis, and the ilium are all part of the pelvis. Let's just put you straight here. So then we're looking at the femur. So we've got the femur, which is obviously forming part of the leg. And then if we just move you here, tibia and fibula. And then this wonderful floating bone here is actually the patella, which is encased in the quadriceps muscles and obviously forms part of the knee. We've got the calcaneus. We're all aware of that area within our dogs. The tarsal bone. So this is the tarsus or the hock area. Then again, you've got metatarsal. So you've got metacarpal and metatarsal. Metatarsal, just think of toes, is what makes me think, so it's metatarsal bones. And again, excuse me, you've got the phalanx, or the phalanges, the proximal ones, the middle ones, and the distal ones. So hopefully that's given you a sense of these directional terms a little bit as well. So let's just go on to having a look at the muscles now. We'll introduce you to this in a little bit more later. There I am. Here we are. We're going to actually have a look at the head musculature. Now, as I say, we've only got a little bit of time here, so I'm going to just briefly go through the head muscles. Okay, I'm actually not wanting to go into too much detail, because I think you're probably going to want to know more about the legs and the torso and those kind of muscles. I think they're going to be ones you're going to be more familiar with, you're more likely to feel are of use to you. It's not that the head is unimportant, of course it's not that, but it is obviously quite complex, as you can see here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to actually just show you the number of layers, don't worry about names here, of all these different muscles of the head. I mean, there's just so many, it's unbelievable really. You can see this muscle here is called zygomaticus. Remember that we were talking about the zygomatic arch here. Okay, so there are ways to link and connect your understanding of words when you're looking at the anatomy. Okay, but I'm not going to talk too much about the head muscles. So, but I think there's just a few muscles that I think you guys will be aware of. And I just want you to, the temporalis, which is really close to this mandible and is a really incredible, it's on top of the head. And it's an incredible muscle, I think. And it's one that you'll probably be able to feel. And then there's another muscle here called the masseter. And that is below what is the zygomatic arch. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cough here. This is below the zygomatic arch and it closes the jaw. Okay. So, as I say, we're going to just move on a little bit more to the body. What I want to do is just explain a little tiny bit about the dorsal muscles along the spine. They somehow don't like showing them on these programs. So I want to just talk to you about the erector spinal muscles. So there are obviously muscles which run along the spine and have an incredible role, okay? I mean, if you just think about dogs, all the organs hang below the spine. So the spine really needs to be both flexible and strong. It's strong because of, obviously, it's going to be dealing with the weight of all those organs underneath it. The spine needs to cope as a shock absorber and to deal with propulsion. So these deep spinal muscles that I'm going to show you in just a moment really enable the spine to be flexible in the two directions, and it helps to make the spine feel flexible and help stabilize them. So as therapists, we all know this fondly, but there are these muscles called the erector spinae muscles. So if you see here, that I'm going to just very quickly show you this, just how many layers and how complex the muscles can be. Okay, I'm going to go into more detail of the ones that I'm taking away from you now. What I just want to show you is the erector spinae system are these dorsal, so muscles that run along the top of the spine, and slightly more lateral, which means slightly further away from the spine, is this muscle called the iliocostalis, or the iliocostal muscles, and they attach to the top of the iliac crest, which is the crest of the ilium bone, and then onto the ribs. And then slightly deeper than that and slightly closer to the spine, we have this incredible muscle called the longissimus, and it runs all the way up the spine. So we've got, whoops, where is he? Cervical longissimus, and thoracic longissimus. But essentially, I just say that the longissimus runs from the neck along the length of the spine. And then we even nearer to the spine than that, and actually runs just 1 or 2 vertebrae at a time. So it's these layers of muscles here. You have an incredible muscle, as you can see, very close to the spine, called semispinalis. Okay? So these 3 muscle systems form the erector spinae muscle system, which is a really important dorsal on the top of the spine system of muscles for the dog. Okay, so we've got these muscles which are incredibly important, and then we've also got these major muscles, the longissimus, which I've explained, the semispinalis, and then another muscle I'm going to show you in a moment called spinae. And these muscles are major muscles of the dog's neck, and they act to raise the neck and help it move it from side to side. So they're at work a lot of the time. There's also ligaments, but we're not going to get into ligaments that hold the neck up. But we'll go on to that later. So we're just going to have a look here at the whole of the body here. Now, before I get into too much detail in terms of muscles of the leg, muscles of the torso, I think it's important to just explain 2 other things to you in terms of kind of names that we use for muscles. Excuse me. We have something called intrinsic muscles and extrinsic muscles. Now, intrinsic muscles are muscles which are fully contained. So that means the start, the belly, and the insertion. So the whole of the muscle is contained within the structure that you're considering. So we're going to be talking about muscles that are intrinsic to the foreleg. But we also have extrinsic muscles. Now, intrinsic muscles are muscles which are external, they're on the body and the neck, and they attach to the leg. So they're incredible, incredible muscles. So I'm going to go through all of these now. So you have both extrinsic muscles, which run from the torso or the neck or both onto the leg, and then you have the intrinsic muscles, which are just contained within the foreleg. So I'm explaining this because I'm going to try and break it down into intrinsic and extrinsic muscles of both the torso and the forelimb. Something that's really incredible about the dog and never ceases to amaze me is that actually they don't have a clavicle like we do. Their shoulders, which go under so much strain, don't have this bony attachment. Everything that is affected within their motion and movement and landing on the front is all supported by this incredible muscular sling, which is a combination of both extrinsic and intrinsic muscles. Okay, so these extrinsic muscles hold the leg onto the torso, and that freedom of movement is something that I think is a big part of this gracefulness of movement of our dogs. Okay, so I'm just gonna go through some extrinsic muscles here for you, so make sure that I remember everyone for you. Here we go. Whoopsie. So we'll make this chap a little bit bigger for you so you can see him. Oh. Here we are. So one of my favorite muscles, which is an extrinsic forelimb muscle, is something called the brachiocephalicus. And the brachiocephalicus has got 2 parts. So as you can see in this program, it's actually called Clidocephalicus, and then it's also called Clidobrachialis. But basically both of these together form Brachiocephalicus or brachiocephalic. Okay, so wonderful muscle. It draws the limb towards the head and helps stabilize the neck. So the cervical part, as you can see, is within the neck, and then the brachialis is obviously near to the humerus, near to the arm. So we're going to just take that muscle away. We've also got sternocephalicus, which again is an incredible extrinsic muscle. Okay. Another extrinsic muscle that pulls the limb forwards is the omotransversarius. We all know the trapezius, so it affects both the cervical vertebra and the thoracic vertebra, but it also, as you can see, it's extrinsic connection to the outside of what is the spine of the scapula. You have the rhomboids, which is deeper, and then this splenus capitis, which I mentioned earlier, is one of these major muscles of the dog's neck, acting to raise the neck and move it from side to side. Then you have the ventral serratus, or the serratus ventralis. Another muscle you guys may be aware of is the latissimus dorsi. This is the one that if you're a human and you're a big bodybuilder, you'd look like you had really big triangular back shape. And then we're looking at the torso here, and we'll just see if we can move. Where are we? There we go. So you've got the external abdominal oblique, this ventral serratus, you then have an internal abdominal oblique, the transverse abdominis, and the intercostal muscles. Okay, I'm not going to get into too much detail with this for you at the moment, I don't think. We've also got on the underside here, we've got the pectorals. I'm going to, oops, let's not forget the rectus abdominis, a really important muscle there on the ventral side, the belly side of the dog's torso. Okay, what I want to do is actually show you here we go. These different programs show things in different ways, and sometimes it's best to look on this program, which is the Biosphere program, and sometimes it's best to show you on the iVela Learn program. But just showing you here, so again, you've got the external abdominal oblique, deep pectoral muscles, and then the superficial pectoral muscles, which I wanted to show you separately here. So you've got the superficial pectorals. So superficial basically is sort of further out of the body, if you know what I mean. And then of course you've got the deep pectoral muscles. And then if we have a look He's having a dance, sorry. Then you've got this rectus abdominis muscle. So that gives you a sense of the torso, I think. But there is a muscle that I just think is worthy of a mention. And that is the diaphragm. For me, I love the diaphragm. It's an incredible muscle in dissection. It's quite incredible. But if you look at the diaphragm, it's this beautiful sheet, and it actually separates the thoracic and abdominal cavities. It's just, I don't know why, but I love this muscle. I may be going mad. Okay. But there's your dog there. What I want to do now is I'm going to just show you the forelimb. So when we're looking at the forelimb now, we've gone through, when we were looking through the torso a moment ago, some of the extrinsic forelimb muscles. So like we mentioned the trapezius. The trapezius is an extrinsic muscle. It elevates and abducts the forelimb, and it originates, as you could see, along the neck and down onto the thoracic vertebra. But by nature of it being an extrinsic muscle, it attaches to that forelimb. It holds the forelimb to the torso, and it actually anchors on to the spine of the scapula. Okay, so but we're now going to have a look at these intrinsic muscles. So these are muscles that are contained within this forelimb. So we've got the supraspinatus, the deltoids, you have two different elements to the deltoids there, and then you have infraspinatus. You've got, let's just have a look here. You've got the triceps. Now the triceps extend the elbow and flex the shoulder. They're extensors. But just quite interesting for you to know, obviously by nature of it being called triceps, in humans there's 3 heads to the triceps, but with dogs there's actually 4 heads. So if we look here, we have triceps 1. Whoopsie, where are we? The accessory triceps. And there's another bit. So there is actually 4 heads. Let's find them all now. Hang on, where are we? So we've got triceps. That's the deltoids. Triceps. 3. There, underneath. I knew it was hiding deep somewhere. There you go. So that whole area there is part of this layers that is the wonder that is the triceps. I took away the deltoids a moment ago. Now the deltoids are kind of not as significant a muscle as they are in humans. In humans it's very significant. So that was infraspinatus, supraspinatus. We won't go into that. Let's make it too complicated for you. And then you have the brachialis and the biceps brachii. And they flex the leg, they're flexors. So they flex the elbow and extend the shoulder. And when the arm is moving backwards, the arm is stretched, and this stretch lifts and pulls the leg forward swiftly due to the release of these. The brachialis, as you could see, was more lateral, more outside to the biceps brachii, but I'm making it a little bit more complicated now, so I should change and move on. So here, I'm not going to go into detail here. we have lots of different muscles here, digital extensors and flexors. Okay, it gets very complicated the lower you go down the leg. So we'll avoid you needing to get involved into that detail. The useful thing to know, again, with the sort of spanning, the extensors are more towards the front, more cranial. And then the flexors are more towards the back of the leg. So if you're thinking alphabetically and you're assessing, the extensors come before the flexors, E and F. I hope that makes sense. All right. So I think what I probably need to do, because of time, is show you the muscles of the hind limb. So just looking at the hind limb here. I think this is the quickest AMP lesson I've ever given. Hilarious. Okay, so muscles that we really want to be aware of. Let's just give this guy a bit of substance here. So muscles we all know and love are the gluteal muscles. So we have the deep, the medial and the superficial gluteal muscles. This is the medial gluteal muscles, the superficial and the deep. Now the glutes have this role of extending and adduction of the hip joint. They're called hip extensors. Interestingly enough, they don't store an awful lot of fat here, dogs. Well, they don't store fat here, the dogs. So whereas my derriere can be a little bit interesting in girth, you're not going to be getting that kind of big fat store there. Okay. Then other things to be aware of is the tensor fasciae latae, which I will show you as we go through this, which goes over both the gluteal muscles, and then it also runs over the hamstrings and a muscle called the vastus lateralis. Now, the tensor fasciae latae is a tiny a band. It's basically it's an elongated strip of fascia. It's a connective tissue which is located in the thigh and knee. It's quite an amazing, beautiful stretch of connective tissue. But I digress. So let's show you the inside of the thigh now. And here we're going to be looking at the adductors. Now these are deep muscles which adduct the leg. They hold the leg under the body, stopping them from going out to the sides. They attach to the underside of the pelvis, these adductors, and so if there's tightness or problems with adductors, it can cause imbalances in the pelvis. But they actually adduct, which is again a sort of an anatomy term, which means if you think add, you add the limb to the torso. Okay. They also flex the stifle, which is the knee, and they extend the hip. So looking at these adductors, we want to find, first off, we're going to look at Sartorius, which actually, as you can see, wraps around the cranial aspect, which would be the front of the leg, into the medial side of the leg. So that is one of your adductor muscles. You're going to have Pectoralis, abductor, and gracilis. Pectoralis is a thin, short, tight muscle, and it's actually comes very close to the femoral nerve. It's quite often where your vet will take their pulse. So you really, I mean, not that I'm asking you to palpate at all in any way, shape, or form. So just don't go looking for these muscles because of it wouldn't be that welcome. Okay. So then I'm going to show you the hamstrings. And the hamstrings are quite amazing, can vary quite significantly in shape, dependent on your breed. Ooh, it's misbehaving. Here we are. So we have three muscles which are the hamstrings. You've got the biceps femoris, which is this more outside, more lateral muscle. Semitendinosus, and then semimembranosus. Now, quite often people want to try and remember how that works. So you'd have the biceps femoris is the most lateral one, semitendinosus is next, and semimem, by it being M, is more medial, more inside. Medial means more on the inside of the dog. So that's the deeper muscle of the three hamstrings there. The hamstrings extend the hip joints, and again, if they're uneven, they're going to affect the balance of the pelvis. So muscles I just want to show you which are incredible within this rear leg. Also, we're looking at the vastus lateralis, the rectus femoris. There's your tensor fasciae lata, which I talked about before. We'll actually just remove the tensor fasciae lata because I actually want to talk to you about the quadriceps. Now, the quadriceps are the sort of cranial, so towards the head, thigh muscles. And it's one muscle with four heads. And this is the vastus lateralis, vastus intermedius, rectus femoris, and vastus medialis. So those four different sections form the quadriceps. So it's a group of muscles forming the quadriceps. And within that quadriceps, you can actually, if I show you all again, so within that, you're going to actually have a tendon, a quadriceps tendon, which holds the knee joint. It holds the patella within the tendon and within the knee joint. So it actually will go, the tendon will go within this groove, the trochlea of the femur. So these four muscles form the quadriceps muscle group. The quadriceps tendon falls into the trochlea, which is the groove of the femur, and holds this patella, which is part of that knee joint. So there's your hamstrings again. We'll just remove that. When you're looking at the lower limb, I just want to point out to you just the one main muscle really, and that's the gastrocnemius. We're all aware of that one. Okay, and that's an extensor. Extenses the tarsals. Yeah, the hock. So it's an extensor. And then again, we're looking at quite a complex array of digital extensors and flexors. Okay, so again, extensors are towards the cranial at the front, and then flexors are towards the back. So my gosh, I think that's it. So that was a very quick run through of the skeletal system and the muscle system. I hope I haven't missed anything in my haste. I'm going to just show you very quickly, because I haven't shown you anything from my PowerPoint. I was just showing you very briefly. You could see, let's just choose our time wisely. So when you're looking at the spine here, So you've got the spine of the axis. You can see the wings of the atlas there. You've got the scapula here. Now if I make this a little bit bigger, so you've got the scapula here. Now this is the spine of the scapula, and if I show you on here, and rotate it round, you've got the head of the humerus, but you've also got, there's this little bump here which we call the acromion, and that runs up along that spine of the scapula. And you can actually see this on my picture of Frank here. You can actually see the spine of the scapula, and that's the acromion. And then that there is actually the humerus, the crest of the humerus. So that's that point here. So it's really clear on Frank. If you ever study anatomy or therapy, find yourself a nice visitor or a finely haired dog, you'll be onto a winner. But just having a quick look at this from a muscle point of view, I can show you there, you can actually, this is the deltoid here, you can actually see that deltoid there. And then you can see the triceps just coming in here. So it really is just a little bit of a taste of this. I'm just going to show you one tiny video clip here. Oh, these are some pictures I just popped together to just give you an idea of the ask on their bodies dogs actually place. I know Frank was slightly mental there, forgive the picture, but it was all that weight, propulsive force on that one rear leg, just pushing through. You can see this is Lulu. Lulu's really putting that weight on that front left fore at speed, and Frank's taking off from the rear there. And then you see my wonderful friend's dog, Walter, just pushing through and landing on that front. And if you think that that's a muscular sling there, and that allows the scapula and the forearm to rotate around the torso. It's just quite phenomenal. It's an unbelievable thing, really. And I'm just going to briefly, I know we're nearly done. I've virtually finished. I'm just going to show you, this is Frank. And he's having a little walk. I'm going to just show you a couple of things. So you can see here, you've got the costal arch there. You can see this dorsal border of the scapula. So the top of this scapula. We'll just play it a little bit further. Now that, interestingly enough for you guys, Frank wasn't very well at that time. I was just trying to work out what's one. He's got iliosacral discomfort. So actually that wasn't fleas, wasn't anything like that. It just kept jumping back to that area. So then looking at the rear of the dog, what's wonderful with Frank is that you can actually see the ischial tuberosity here, that point there. You can actually see on him really clearly. And then that is the greater trochanter of the femur. The greater trochanter is that sticky out bit of the femur on the rear legs. You can actually see that there. It's really clear here. So that is that point there, and this is that point there. Right, it's 8 o'clock already. My gosh, time flies when you're warbling. I'm just going to very quickly mention that I've used two computer programs here today. One is the Biosphere and one is the iVlearn. They're both very good and very different programs to one another, as you can see. And the Biosphere you can actually get as a phone app, and the iVlearn. I would imagine, unless you're really into A&P like me, you might not want to do this, but they are incredible programs. And as I say, on your PDFs that you'll be emailed, these details will be sent to you so you can have a look at that. A little plug, I'm afraid. I'm doing another webinar in February. This is geared towards people that want to be therapists or are therapists working with dogs. It's more my perspective on what dogs give us as therapists. So it's not going to have any A&P content. But it'd be lovely to see you there. If you'd like to join us, it's open to everyone. So you might know a little bit more about me and what I do. And I'll make this a little bit smaller so you can actually see it. And here's, if ever you have any questions, I know you might have more questions. I'm happy to run over a little bit. I'll let Lisa tell me what she'd like to do. But if you have questions now, I'm happy to chat briefly now and see if I can answer them. Or you can pop me an email and I will get back to you eventually. I think that's everything from me, Lisa. How are you doing?
Thank you. That was fascinating, Carole. I really, really enjoyed it. And wonderful to actually see how the bones look on a dog after you've been going through all of the descriptions of them and the muscles and everything. It's really, really interesting. So thank you very much.
Well,
I think it's going to make us look at our dogs quite differently as well. A lot of us, I know I focus a lot on how dogs move. You can tell a lot about how a dog's feeling by the movement, but when you're actually looking at which muscles are moving and those incredible overlays of muscles as well, the body is such a complex system. I have a book called Dog Anatomy here. It's quite a large
book. Yes, it's a good book.
Which is very good, and it's all kind of, it's lots of explanations, black and white illustrations, but to actually see it in a presentation teaches you so much more. You know, I've spent a lot of time pouring through that, but it's completely different when you can actually discuss it in the way that you've been discussing it. I find it really inspirational, so thank you.
No problem. It's quite hard with even the two programs. There's differences. I mean, at the end of the day, we are all individuals, and you know, I mean, I have done work with cadavers and dissection, and it is so complex. There is no obvious literal layer of things, and you get different terminology and different imagery when you look at these books and diagrams. So it's so complicated. I was trying to find ways to use the two programs without confusing, so I hope I achieved that for everyone.
Yeah, it worked really, really well. So let me just see what questions we have. Oh, try and find them. Hold on, questions. Where are they? Oh, it's all been compressed. Let's see if I can make it. It's showing me one at a time instead of all of them.
That's okay. Might give you a chance to work out the answers, hey?
Breath. Lots of lovely feedback saying amazing, makes me want to go back to uni. I love this topic so much. I think that's Lainey. It's very hard to see because for some reason it's compressed them.
It can actually be a really dry subject because it's so easy to just be listing muscles. So, I mean, if I could have maybe made it a little, had a bit more extra bits in, but I just didn't have the time.
An hour is no time at all for such a complex subject. You packed an awful lot in, Carole. It was fantastic. June actually says, can you recommend a simple reference book which covers all that you have so wonderfully shown us tonight?
Yes. Well, I found when I was learning, one of the best things that I did was a canine anatomy colouring book. I thought that was quite a brilliant thing. I could turn around and crawl under my bed and pull it out if you like, but it could be an interesting moment. But if you go onto Amazon, there is a canine anatomy colouring book which I found really, really simple, and actually and they have different plates of different parts of the body, and then very simple explanation of the skin and the hair and all the different organs. Excuse me. And I think that's a really good one. I can email you, Lisa, if you want the full details of it, and you can add it to your recordings for people.
Great. Thank you, Carole. Just seeing if there's any other questions. There's lots of lovely positive feedback. Oh, June says, I found it on Amazon, so that must have been the book I was holding up.
That's quite a hard book to follow, your book. So you've
Yes.
gone into the deep end there. So if people are looking for simple, that one's quite challenging. So I have got it. You're a thorough lady, Lisa, I have to say.
Oh, well, any recommendations you have, we can include in the
Yeah.
video recording link.
There's an
Because,
incredible book which is called Dogs in Motion, which looks at anatomy and has some video, has a DVD with it as well. You can get it in English and German. I'm not sure about other languages, I'm afraid. But Dogs in Motion is a really good one as well. Um, it's slightly more complicated than the colouring book. So, yeah.
okay, great. Um, because we're recording this session, I'll be uploading the video and converting it, so it may not go out tonight. Certainly with the ISCP, with our Facebook group, I will be able to just share a secret link on the group that everyone can access, but because there's quite a few people here who aren't members of the ISCP, who've come in through hearing about the webinar, and some who probably come in through Carole and through Bowen as well. I'll be sending out emails to all of you probably tomorrow, the day after tomorrow at the very latest, with a private link to the webinar. It won't be available publicly. And there'll be a PowerPoint, not a PowerPoint, sorry. Yes, a PowerPoint.
It's a PDF,
Yeah,
PDF of the
yeah,
PowerPoint.
of your presentation that Carole has put together for us to send out as well. So I'll include as much information as I can. So please bear with me, because there's a lot of people who I'll be emailing individually, and so it certainly won't get done tonight, but I will try to do it tomorrow. If not, I'll try to finish it the day after. Emma says, my Suki has problems in all four legs, so this has been very interesting, thank you. And Colin said, if I'd known about the PDF, my poor wife needn't have done so much writing. Colin's wife has been writing notes for him.
Yes, well, I mean, the PDF isn't going to show the 3D programs clearly. It's and so you won't get everything that you need there. But
Yeah,
there's a pointer on the PDF to where those programs are, should you want it to be a little bit decadent and get them yourselves. I think they're about both of them are they're less than £50 each, but obviously it is quite a spend. So
okay. Alison says she's got your colouring, the colouring book, and it's fab.
brilliant.
And Ali says, thank you, Carole, very interesting. I now know why my vet charges so much after having to learn all those bones and muscles.
We all forget. This is the hilarious things. People that have all learnt it, you know, the dog couldn't give a monkeys if you know whether you're playing with a biceps femoris or not. And it's amazing how these wonderful vets, and forgive me for any vets that are watching, we forget that, well, I know I'm not a vet, but the vets I know, you forget the names of the muscles and things like that. You know what to do with them, but you know, it is difficult. I have to remind myself quite regularly. So this has been good for me too.
Oh, fantastic. Where are we? Dawn says, thank you, Carole, loved it. We'll be tuning into the February webinar.
Oh, thank you.
Elizabeth says, thank you, Carole. This couldn't have been better time for me. Found this so inspirational. Can't wait to see you in March.
Ooh,
Fiona says, thank you. It was great seeing the muscles and bones on Frank. Jenny says, thank you so much. A great presentation. I've done massage in humans. This was so interesting to transfer it. And Liz says, thank you so much, Carole. Very interesting. And Colin says, thank you so much, Carole. Wasn't interesting, although a lot to take in. My wife's been taking notes. Lots of people saying thank you so much. Nolwyn, who's in Spain, says thank you so much. It was a good study session for me, as I'll soon have an exam on canine anatomy.
I was hoping that. I think quite a few people that have joined that are not part of the school are, they've got a little assessment soon, put it that way.
And Liz says, thanks, Carole. Fascinating talk. Much to take on board. Maya says, thank you so much. I found this absolutely amazing to see. Gail says, thank you. Very interesting. Janet says, very interesting. Found myself looking at the dogs to see if I could identify bits during the session. So
it's good to video your dogs. Video your dogs. Go down the park without your dogs and video them moving and see. And then you can see all the different shapes, you know, the greyhounds compared to the bulldogs, and and start to think about it. Those chunky monkeys make it a bit harder, but yeah, it's a really good thing to do.
Fascinating.
Mm.
Okay, I shall stop recording.